The phone number, if you want to be a part of the program, 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Can I just, out of the gate, I got to tell you, this crazy schedule, I'm doing 6 hours of radio right now. I start at 9 a.m. I end at 3 p.m. And I had somebody actually email me and tell me that I should stop complaining about this, that it questions, there's questions about my work ethic, complaining about working 6 hours a day. I got to tell you, anyone who says that and it has no idea the first thing about talk radio, and I love my job. I'm incredibly blessed to do this. I would do this for the rest of my life. But I do have to say, sitting in a chair talking for 43 minutes per hour for 6 hours a day, try to do that with about 3 minutes per break after every 14 minutes or so. It does get a little taxing. And last week, I didn't know what I was in for, so I didn't go to the gym. Well, yesterday, I went to the gym. I'm old. It hurts to laugh. Oh man. Okay, we can move on. I'm shifting topics around here. I want to start with this. A buddy of mine asked me to write a column about it. I started writing it, and it is presently in my head. This is Holy Week for the world's several billion Christians. Christians believe that this is the anniversary week of Jesus of Nazareth, claiming to be the King of Israel, the King of the Jews, enters as a king on Palm Sunday, which was this past Sunday. And this coming Friday will be Good Friday, and that is the date the crowd turned on him, having welcomed him as a conquering king on a Sunday, realizing he was not a king in the way they expected. They turned on him, yelled, "Crucify him." He was tortured, beaten to within an inch of his life, had a crown of thorns placed on his head, forced to carry a cross up a hill, then nailed to that cross and raised above the people for everyone to see with the King of the Jews label attached over him as his sin. And the world went black. The world went dark. Even God himself could not look down on Jesus of Nazareth. As Martin Luther said, the entire sin of all the world then existing and there to come were piled upon his head, making him the greatest sinner in human history. And then on the third day, having been taken down from the cross, died, buried, wrapped in burial linens, put in a tomb, a big stone rolled away. The third day he came back to life. It turned out he really was the Messiah. He is alive in that event in human history. If you put your faith in it, you believe that event in human history, it has regenerative effects on you. You can develop a personal relationship with Christ, and you can obtain salvation, a salvation set apart from all those around you who don't believe. The heretics and the damned, it doesn't matter. You'll have eternal life. As the Democratic Party and the wokes in this country have moved away from Orthodox Christianity, some of them on their way out the door of Christendom have instead embraced the resurrection not as a physical reality, but as a metaphor, a story we tell our kids, an ethical cause, an ethical case, a moral path to guidance in life. It becomes like the world's religions. Christianity is not really a religion per se, because religions give you an ethical, moral path through which you follow to gain the next stage of life. Christianity is actually different from that. Christianity says, believe in this event, this man conquering death. It turns out he really is God. Believe that event. It is an actual historic event for which there is profound evidence. Believe it, and it has a regenerative effect in your life. You can develop this personal relationship with Jesus Christ, invite him into your life, and he will change you. You don't follow this moral path to eternity and salvation. He indwells within you. You become more Christ-like in this process of sanctification, where you live life with God dwelling in you, and through the Spirit you are regenerated. And you follow the moral laws out of love, and because you become more Christ-like over time, you realize without him you can't follow those rules. The rest of the world says just follow the rules, and many of the rules, the rules that reflect God, the world decides are bad. And the left, as they reject the actual physical resurrection of Christ and the miracles of Christianity and the supernatural nature of Christianity, they abandon the idea for an eternal heaven and instead try to build a heaven on earth, a utopia, if you will. And what they do is they repackage the moral framing of Christianity, repent and be baptized and saved, to now do this litany of things like all the other non-Christian religions, do this litany of things to have eternity, but really it's do this litany of things to have salvation in the here and now, to build the heaven and earth. And any obstacle that blocks their agenda, that slows it down, they launch a moral crusade against it. And in the moral crusade against it, they wage all-out warfare, character assassination, lies, whatever they can, because it is more important to get to what they want than the truth in order to get there. They're perfectly willing to lie in order to get their way because they believe that their cause and the end game is greater than where we are. And so they'll be forgiven the sin of lying if they then use that lie to get to a greater good. It's a perversion of the Christian faith, and it very much reflects a lot of the world's religions, the secularism that has pervaded the wokes and pervaded the Democrats. Thus, we get to the filibuster. In Georgia, the state of Georgia has passed an election law. The election law does not engage in voter suppression like the Democrats say. In fact, what the law does is it expands the number of Saturdays statewide for voting, allows Sunday voting, legalizes drop boxes. It does require photo ID for absentee voting. That's widely popular, which is why the Democrats have fixated on mischaracterizing water at the polling locations. Now, never mind that the law says if the lines grow long, they must add precincts and machines before the next election to keep the lines from growing long. It allows water receptacles at polling locations within 150 feet. Outside of 150 feet, you can have a band and you can have food trucks. You can give water, you can give beer, you can give whatever, as long as you get the permitting to give away alcohol or sell it to people standing in line waiting to vote. You've got to be 25 feet away from them, 150 feet away from the door of the polling location, but you can do it. You can have a food truck. You can give out margaritas. I don't care, whatever you want, as long as you get the permits. If it's just water, you're giving away water. It doesn't matter. You're allowed to give away bottles of water. You can sell the water. You can give it away. It doesn't matter as long as you stay 25 feet from the voting line. The voters can leave and grab their water and come back. You would not know that from the way the Democrats have characterized this. The way the Democrats have characterized this, you had Michael Erick Dyson, a left-wing pundit on MSNBC who sees race in everything. I wonder if he even uses white toilet paper. Michael Erick Dyson says that the Republicans wouldn't give Jesus Christ a cup of water on the cross. The reason the Democrats have to lie about this is because the filibuster stands in the way of the Democrats' agenda in Washington, D.C. The filibuster must be overcome. And the way the Democrats, who are now devoid of any sense of orthodoxy, have decided to get rid of the filibuster is to use religious, moral language to make a moral case to the American public. They don't care about the truth of the matters they are asserting. They care about the fierce urgency of now, the fierce morality of getting rid of it, because the filibuster stands in the way of not just voting rights, but the environment. The filibuster is what stands in the way of ending fossil fuel dependency. The filibuster is what stands in the way of racial equity. The filibuster is what stands in the way of civil rights. The filibuster is what stands in the way of inequality. The filibuster is what stands in the way of, you pick the moral cause of the left that they have decided is a moral cause, and they attribute now the filibuster as that which stands between them and utopia. So to get to utopia, you must get rid of the filibuster. To get rid of the filibuster, you must build the moral case against the filibuster, the moral case that but for the filibuster, we would have utopia. And the way you do that is you show all of the moral good that the filibuster is blocking to show that the filibuster itself is the moral evil. Right now, it's civil rights. The Democrats want to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, which replaces former Civil Rights Act. The Supreme Court declared Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act unconstitutional. That was the preclearance provision of certain states. The Democrats now essentially want to apply that to the entire country, claiming that would not be unconstitutional. They've got to get past the filibuster to get it done. They've got to get the 50 votes so Kamala Harris can break a tie. And the only way to get there is to overcome the 60-vote threshold in the Senate. So this is all about getting rid of the filibuster. Every lie they tell about the Georgia voting bill, the election reform bill in Georgia, is a bit of moral urgency to weigh down the filibuster in hopes of breaking it. Every lie they tell about now in Florida, NBC News has a story, Florida's going to stop allowing water at the polls. Actually, Florida already has a law that bans electioneering within 150 feet of the polling locations. They're going to clarify it. And now they're saying, Florida's going to make, voters are going to die standing in line in the Florida heat, which isn't actually true, and it's grossly mischaracterized. But again, it is the fierce urgency of now, the moral imperative to get rid of the filibuster so the Democrats can get to their utopia. Now, what is the utopia they want? Well, it's anything progressives believe brings about equality. In this country, conservatives believe we are all created equal, but do not have equal outcome. Progressives believe that we are not all created equal, but we can obtain equality through the rearranging of society and equity, wherein we take from those who have and give to those who have not to balance everything out. It is Marxism in all but name. They believe it is necessary. They want socialism in this country. They openly defend it now. And the filibuster stands between capitalism and socialism. To get rid of the filibuster is to bring about equality. To get rid of the filibuster is to bring about healing for the planet. To get rid of the filibuster is to bring about the end of inequality. At least they have that in their head. Now, you and I know that's not the case. But the filibuster is their latest impediment to their goals. They have no real religion, and so all political causes become religion. And anything standing in their way, they must take up a moral crusade against it. So it's Donald Trump and the Republicans are racist and bigots. They see black and Hispanic voters drifting to the GOP. They must up the ante and try to destroy ruthlessly Republicans through character assassination. The American tax code is a harbinger of inequality. Corporate taxes and taxes on the rich must be raised. The tax code is a moral impediment to their equality. The filibuster blocks all of this from happening, so there must be a moral crusade against the filibuster. The states, the fact that the individual states each have 2 votes in the Senate, there is a moral case to be made against the Senate. Eventually, they'll want the Senate to be ended. They will make a moral case against the American Constitution as federal courts, start telling Democrats you can't discriminate on the basis of race when it comes to reparations programs. They will make these moral cases against anything that stand in the way of their version of utopia. Now, their version of utopia, of course, they will never have. They will never be happy. You see this with the wokes, where the zeal of the wokes means you must always get more woke. What was fine and woke last week is now heresy as they advance. The people who couldn't be canceled last week for things they said, this week will be canceled for the things they said that made them not cancelable last week. There's always, eventually it turns on itself and it collapses, but we're not to the point of that collapse yet. We're headed there, but on the way there, they will burn down everything in sight in the name of utopia. The end game here is bad for everyone because of the eschatology of the secularists, as I've mentioned before. You, if you're a Christian, gain salvation through your personal relationship with Christ, your sanctification. You've been justified by faith if you're Protestant. Your justification and your sanctification then reveal your good works, shows you have that changed heart. The Spirit lives within you. Ultimately, you die. You have eternal life with Christ. With secularism, their eschatology is very bitter and brutal. It's one reason they're so angry in the world is because they can't have their utopia as long as mouth breathers who dissent live. So you either got to exterminate them, as has happened in communist and Nazi regimes among the socialists, or you just got to silence them in this country. You've got to subvert the dominant discourse. You have to shut them down. You have to keep them silent. You have to not allow them in the town square. There can be no dissent from progressives' utopia because salvation does not come for the woke unless the non-woke are shut up or exterminated. It ends bitterly every time secularism rises to that level. You see mass death, as you did in communist societies, or in this country, mass censorship, as you see the wokes try to silence anyone who stands in the way. They will come for anyone who stands for the filibuster. The Democrats acknowledged last year they abused it. They don't want to actually say they did. They just say, well, the filibuster in the last several years was abused more than all of American history. It was them doing it. They don't want to say that. And then they try to pivot and say, well, it was founded for racism and Jim Crow. Actually, the first time the filibuster was used was to deal with a printer issue in the United States Senate. Had nothing to do with race. It just so happens that civil rights issues, as the hot button issues of the day, were the ones that were being filibustered, in the same way that the Democrats tried to filibuster any sort of Republican health care reform, because that was the hot button issue of the day. But they want to revise history. They have a media helping them do it. But ultimately, all of this is about the messianic zeal of bringing utopia, and the lies are important to it because they must build a moral case now against the filibuster to try to get rid of it, to build the case with an ignorant American public, indoctrinated in American government-run schools, ignorant of history, so that they can build enough pressure to overcome the Republicans and convince Joe Manchin of the fierce urgency of now.
You can follow Erick around social media at EW.
I hope you got the chicken wing recipe yesterday. If you're on the list, you did. Text the word recipe to 33777. You'll get back a link. You've got to click the link and affirmatively enter your email address in order to get on the recipe list. But I did send out the recipe. I'll send out another one this week. Maybe something in time for Easter. Speaking of Easter, I want to spend a moment on this. I wrote about this morning. You know, I've got a daily email, and I've been reading Tim Keller's book. If you want to order Tim Keller's book, if you want to see what I've written about the Georgia election law, you can text the word data to 33777, and I'll send you back a link. Let me just dwell on this for a moment, having talked about the Democrats and their moral urgency for the filibuster and taking so much religious rhetoric and wrapping it up in this heaven on earth stuff. Here's the thing. This is Holy Week. I try to focus a little bit on it. And I've been doing a lot of reading Tim Keller's book, going back through because he recommends it in this book, N.T. Wright's Resurrection of the Son of God. You know, they make a point that is worth reflecting on, and I write about it this morning, that the story of the resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth is genuinely unique in human history. So the Jews had only two beliefs in their entire culture. The Jews believed either that there was no such thing as the resurrection or that we would all be resurrected on the same last day of history, and the resurrection of a single person in the middle of history was impossible. The Romans, the Greeks, the Indian subcontinent cultures, the East Asian, Norse, Egyptian, African, Western Hemisphere cultures that existed at the time 2,000 years ago lacked the language of the Christian resurrection. In fact, overwhelmingly, the pagan religions rejected the idea of resurrection at all. And the few stories that considered resurrection either did not exist or came in one of two distinct forms. One was the resurrection involved a human coming back to life as God-like with a shining appearance. In almost all cases, you couldn't lay eyes on the person because they had clearly become God-like. The other was the human comes back from the grave, very pale and cadaverous, looking like one who had withered in the tomb, no regeneration. That's it. On our planet 2,000 years ago, there was almost, to a culture, regardless of its place on the planet, a rejection of the idea of a physical bodily resurrection back to human form. And of those that did have an idea of resurrection, it was very distinct and fit a similar pattern. And then Jesus comes out of the tomb. The early Christians spoke into a Jewish culture that was most distinctly hostile to the idea of a resurrection in the course of human history. It would have been incredible and deviated completely from everything every Jew on the planet believed. And yet, despite that, the belief took off. It exploded. The apostles tell us that Jesus came back, his burial cloth was folded.
15.
He looked in a way that was unrecognizable, and then recognizable, he could pass through rooms. Yeah. That archetype didn't exist anywhere on planet Earth until then. Something had to have happened. Hello, welcome back. I want to remind you about Rocco's first annual Rockin' Affair. If you don't know where Rocco's is a biker-friendly hangout in North Georgia, in Jasper, Georgia, on the way up to Ellijay on 575 if you're coming from South Georgia up through Atlanta. They're going to have music, they're going to have food, they're going to have free admission to the public. They want a fun way to enjoy the warm weather, kick off a return to normalcy. We'll get into that here in a bit, but this is for you wherever you are in Georgia, whether you're down in Valdosta or Albany or Brunswick, or whether you're up in Rome or Dalton, wherever you are, and you are a vendor, you want to participate, you want to show off your goods, you want to have a good time, you want to participate. It's a great way to get back to normal and highlight your business. Reach out to Rocco's. They're looking for vendors right now. They've got Reformation Brewery, they got Coca-Cola, they got Jasper Jeep. They've partnered with Pickens Pets as a charity. Go to rockosjasper.com. You can go to their Facebook page as well. You can sponsor. Now listen, this isn't what you would expect. They're 20 minutes north of Woodstock. They're on Highway 515. This venue, they've got amazing food. They're going to have a massive crowd coming from all over north of I-20, mostly, I'm sure, but it's going to be a giant crowd. And they want to be able to get you there to help you show off your product, your goods, your service, your company. You want to play a part of it, go to rockosjasper.com. That's rockosjasper.com. Glad to have them sponsoring the program. And again, it's going to be May 1st and 2nd from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. up there. Free admission to the public. All right. We gotta talk about healthcare. I was going to start the show with this, but I think now is the perfect time, having talked about the filibuster. There's this bizarre story, and I want to kick off this talk about the virus with what's happening in San Francisco. A recall challenge is being mounted in San Francisco against the school board out there. There are lawsuits flying now, among other things. The Asian American community is accused of being race traitors for wanting their kids going back to school. They're siding with the white people. And the whole thing is very bizarre. It's standard San Francisco politics. Let me just read you part of this. This is from the New York Times. The pandemic has brought grinding frustrations to parents, educators, and students across the country. But perhaps no place has matched San Francisco in its level of infighting, public outrage, and halting efforts to reopen schools. In February, the city sued its own school district, which has been entirely remote for a year, and Board of Education, charging they were violating state law by not resuming in-person instruction. Soon after, two parents, infuriated by the school board's decision to rename 44 schools, even as it kept them closed, started a drive to recall 3 of the board members. Some 9,000 people have joined the campaign's mailing list. They're expected to begin collecting signatures soon. Then critics of the board unearthed 4-year-old tweets written by the board's vice president, in which she accused Asian Americans of siding up to white Americans to get ahead without confronting racism, comparing them to slaves who benefited from working inside a slave owner's house. More than a third of the district students are Asian American. Tumult turned to all-out war. Within days, state legislators, the mayor, and 2 members of the board itself had joined a rapidly growing chorus demanding that the vice president, Allison Collins, resign. Ms. Collins refused to do so, so the board has stripped her of her roles on committees and of her vice presidency, leaving the board divided. Amid the chaos, one thing has remained clear. A large share of the city's public school students are unlikely to see the inside of their classrooms this academic year. What we are seeing in this country, San Francisco is one of the biggest indicators of this. But around the country, we are seeing union-based school systems dismissive of science and demanding more government money. If you will recall, the Biden administration claimed that its $1.9 trillion COVID package would get schools reopened. Once the teachers' unions had the money, they said, we may need a little more money. In Northern Virginia, it has come out in one of the counties up there, one of the more prosperous counties of Northern Virginia, maybe it's Lowndes County, one of them up there, that Lowndes County, that's in, forgive me. I'm trying to remember which one. So maybe it's Arlington or Alexandria, one of them. In any event, it turns out that the superintendent of schools has placed his children in private school while lecturing parents on hiring private tutors lest their children be given an advantage over poor students in the public schools. He's put his kids in private school, and they're now saying they're not going to reopen. The science conflicts with the teachers' unions, and the teachers' unions, so tied to the Democratic Party, has found a Democratic Party reluctant to disrupt the teachers' union's power, which puts the Democratic Party aligned against parents. That's not going to be sustainable for the Democratic Party. If they don't side with the voters, and by the way, it's actually the parents are the bigger base of voters of the teachers' unions, the Republicans could find a way to capitalize on this. This reminds me of Joe Biden the other day at his press conference. Let me go back to Joe Biden's press conference the other day. He said this.
You also just made some news by saying that you are going to run for re-election.
I said that is my expectation.
So is that a yes, that you are running for re-election?
Look, I don't know where you guys come from, man. I've never been able to travel. I'm a great respecter of fate. I've never been able to plan 3.5 years ahead for certain.
And if you do run, will Vice President Harris be on your ticket?
I would fully expect that to be the case. She's doing a great job. She's a great partner. She's a great partner.
And do you believe you'll be running against former President Trump?
Oh, come on. I don't even think about it. I have no idea. I have no idea whether there'll be a Republican Party. Do you? I know you don't have to answer my question, but I mean, do you?
Okay, first of all, that was Caitlin Collins from CNN, and I just thought at the time, I hear she's very nice, but what a wasted opportunity to question the President of the United States on speculation about 4 years from now. But Biden said, I have no idea if there will be a Republican Party. There is this idea on the Democratic Party side that the Republicans are on the verge of collapse. Never mind that the Republicans are on the verge of taking back the House of Representatives, and more likely than not will in 2022 take it back, and they may take back the Senate, although it'll be more difficult. Republicans are making inroads in governor's mansions and state houses and state senates, and yet the Democrats are believing this mythology that the Republican Party could be on the verge of collapse because in their bubble, no one likes the Republican Party, pay no attention to the American public. So they side with teachers' unions thinking there's going to be no alternative. Why should we distance ourselves from any part of our base when the Republican Party is going to go away, which isn't true. In fact, the Republicans could probably eat their lunch on this. And now you've got the national COVID vaccine worries coming back from the Biden administration. This was a commentator on CNN last night.
Vaccine passport, good idea, bad idea?
I think it's a little bit inevitable at this point. I mean, I think a lot of companies are going to be demanding it. If the government doesn't get involved in it, you'll see a lot of private ventures doing it. Countries are going to demand it if Americans want to travel to those places. So I think of it as sort of inevitable. We just got to make sure we do it in a way that's fair to people and protects people's privacy.
Many on the right are playing this as Big Brother, but they've been anti-pandemic and anti any kind of prophylaxis to begin with. Here's the Florida governor.
It's completely unacceptable for either the government or the private sector to impose upon you the requirement that you show proof of vaccine to just simply be able to participate in normal society.
Can't go to school if your kids aren't vaccinated. Why is this so different?
Yeah, look, private companies can do what they want, and that's clearly something the governor understands. Private companies may say, look, I don't want people who are going to come in and infect other people. I don't want my place of business to be a super spreading place. That's very much within their rights to do so. I think you are going to see companies doing those kinds of things. And I think that's part of the reason why you're going to probably see a lot of people who are on the fence jump off the fence and get vaccinated.
But, that kind of talk is what keeps people from getting vaccinated. Big Brother telling you what to do. You shouldn't even be telling people to get the vaccine. This is a little bit of this mission creep on the right about the pandemic is a hoax. You don't really need the mask. The vaccine, which, was Trump's whole call to fame, right? Now he's quiet on it, basically, and they're saying, don't let them push you around. It's not getting us to a better place anytime fast.
You got to love the smugness of a guy who got preferential treatment by his brother, the governor of New York. But let's go back to what DeSantis said about this vaccine. And by the way, you should know there's a problem for the Democrats here. While white men are lagging behind the rest of people in their willingness to get the vaccine, minority communities are lagging behind in their access to get it. So what you could essentially be doing is, if you did this passport, and I'll get into what it is and how it would work, if you do it, you potentially are depriving Black and Hispanic communities of the right to travel because they don't have this vaccine passport. And it does make you wonder, we do have a right to travel. How will federal courts look on a prohibition on traveling without this vaccine passport?
You want the fox to guard the hen house? I mean, give me a break. I think this is something that has huge privacy implications. It is not necessary to do. We're going to have hit 3.5 million seniors that have gotten shots sometime this week, likely 75% of seniors. It's important to be able to do it. But at the same time, we are not going to have you provide proof of this just to be able to live your life normally. And I'm going to be taking some action in an executive function, emergency function here very shortly.
So DeSantis doesn't want you to have a passport. Now, here's the thing. Private companies, the commentator with Chris Cuomo was right. A lot of private companies can require it. There are internationally, a lot of businesses want the government to do this. Now, the way this works is some technology, Apple and Google have been coordinating on for example, COVID tracking on your phone. A lot of governments are using them. Essentially what your phone does. Let me explain that one first. That would probably be helpful. So you have an option on your phone to turn on COVID tracking, and Apple, at least, I think you can trust, maybe not Google, but Apple, it makes it very anonymous. What happens is every smartphone has a Bluetooth feature. Now, if you got a flip phone or an old phone, no use to you. But if you got a smartphone, Apple and Google have come up with a program together so that it works across platforms, and it uses Bluetooth. Bluetooth can measure out how far from each person you are based on the strength of a Bluetooth signal, which goes about 30 feet. If you've got Bluetooth headphones on, you walk away from your phone, it starts to crackle over time. It's very strong within the first 10 feet or so, and then it fades. Well, using that signal, Bluetooth can detect your distance from another human being. So everybody has on, let's just say in the hypothetical world, everybody has on their COVID tracking on their phones. Well, you go to the doctor and you get a COVID test. What happens is your phone has been logging everyone you've been near for more than just a few seconds over the last 14 days, the period of time by which you can be contagious, allegedly. It may actually be 10 days now that we know. But in any event, so your phones track the Bluetooth identifiers of the people you've been around. They don't know who those people are. They know what their Bluetooth identifiers are. What happens is you go to your doctor says you've tested positive, you need to begin contact tracing on all the people you've come into contact with in the last 10 days. Well, your phone would give you the option to send a message. It has collected everyone you've come into contact with for extended periods of time over the last 10 days, and your phone can then transmit based on the Bluetooth signatures that you came into contact with, messages to those phones. You don't know who your phone is sending it to. All you can find if you were to hack it were a Bluetooth identifier. There's no identifying information. Likewise, the person who gets the message doesn't know who it's come from. So you're anonymous in the process, but the other person gets the phone and basically it would say, heads up, you have come into prolonged contact with someone in the last 10 days who has been diagnosed with COVID. Please go get tested. You don't know it and they don't know it. And the government, this is the other big key here, is the government doesn't know it. Now, some governments have pushed for this, but it's kind of interesting. In some places, like Sweden, for example, the Swedes are opposed to the Google and Apple standard because it does not allow the government to know who's using it. So it's too private for some governments. And for other people, they're still skeptical of privacy. I don't blame them. And so they don't want to use it. I get that as well. The larger problem here, though, is with the passport. where the Biden administration is essentially saying they want a passport, which would be an app on your phone or a card, or you would have to take your vaccination card with you everywhere you go to show that you've been vaccinated, or in some cases, as some countries want to implement it, you've just had a negative COVID test, or you've already had it, and so you can't be contagious, and that would expire after a few months, then you have to get the vaccine. It's a huge invasion of privacy. I understand the public health concerns, but as well, what we're seeing is that as people get vaccinated, if we can encourage people to get vaccinated, there's less and less need for this. So maybe instead of scaring people about privacy concerns, why don't you actually focus on encouraging people to get vaccinated?
You're listening to the Erick Erickson Show.
Hello and welcome. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number, if you'd like to be a part of the program, 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Greg and Marietta, you are going to be up next. Welcome.
Good morning, Eric. A little bit off your topic, but aligns with Republican control of state legislatures. You have spoken about school choice recently, and there was a great victory yesterday in the state legislature. Senate Bill 47 passed, and that will go to the governor for signing, and it amends the Georgia Special Needs Scholarship.
Yeah,
that allows students with 504s to make a school choice. And boy, did the public school lobby fight it tooth and nail.
They did, and the public schools were able to kill some measures, but essentially, as I understand it, they killed one measure, and then the state Senate rolled the dead measure into one of theirs and was able to get the House to go along with it. So they have expanded slowly school choice in Georgia. It looks like they're getting a clue now, and in particular, this one does help kids with special needs as a great program. The Democrats are already vowing, if they take back control, to get rid of this stuff, which is a big red flag. Honest to goodness, I think, Greg, the next big fight we've got to have in the state with Republicans is roll this stuff out and increase awareness. Like, for example, so my kids go to a small Christian private school, and that school has the ability to take advantage of the Opportunity Scholarship Fund. and the parents are now getting educated about it so that we can bring in more kids from underprivileged families without them having to cover the cost of tuition. We've got to roll this stuff out further. But I'm glad you highlighted that. I was going to get to it in probably the third hour, and I wasn't sure I could, so I'm glad you called in about it now.
Right. I'm in the same boat, same type of school, and the reach we have had with Georgia Goal and other scholarship funds to get children with needs into our school system, into our particular school, and help those who need help has been fantastic to see.
Well,
and you're right. This is a soccer mom issue, and they fight tooth and nail for their children.
Well, and you know what's so interesting here, Greg, and it's that one of the arguments that Democrats have made that unfortunately I found a lot of Christian parents in small Christian schools have grabbed hold of is, well, you know, if you take this money, the government's going to be able to regulate your school. Which, interestingly enough, when you look at the actual legislation, the legislation prohibits the government interference in the schools. And yet so many people I'm finding Christian families in churches oppose this legislation because the teachers unions are selling them this lie and they're believing it.
Absolutely. And this allows students to change to a different public school that meets their needs, not just go to a private school. So, and again, it is school choice across the board. And it was just amazing to actually listen to some of the arguments against it on the floor, and those who were for it said this is about individual students' rights and needs, not an attack on public schools.
Right, and yet they all feel it that way. You know, I was told, for example, so Wes Cantrell in the state house, it was one of the proponents of one of those measures, and I think part of his measure was wrapped into this school choice reform that the Senate passed. They were way more supportive of his package than the House was. But one of the issues here is that the chairman of the superintendent of schools in Cherokee County, on the day of the vote, came out and assailed Cantrell's measure and said essentially he was trying to kill public schools in Cherokee County, which he wasn't trying to do at all. It was a flat out lie. But why let the truth stand in the way of your moral argument in favor of whatever you want, which was deeply disappointing. So I'm glad it passed.
It's sad to see that tactic being applied at all levels. I don't know who wrote the playbook for Democrats on that, but that tactic is being applied in places you wouldn't imagine.
Yeah, it is. I got to let you go there. We're out of time, but I'm glad you called in about that one, Greg. This legislation, by the way, Butch Miller, Mike Dugan, John Kennedy, Larry Walker, Jason Vitarte, Greg Dolezal, Billy Hickman, Lee Anderson, Brian Strickland, Ben Watson, Randy Robertson, Bruce Thompson, John Albers, Max Burns, Jeff Mullis, and Steve Gooch were the sponsors. Steve Gooch was the primary author of it. It expands the Georgia Special Needs Scholarship Act to revise the prior school year requirements, to expand eligibility for students and allow them into private schools, which is a good thing. The governor will sign it. Hello and welcome. How are you? It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. I got to tell you guys, I'm having a pandemic side effect in my relations with government. I was talking in the first hour of the program, I was talking about the all of the issues related to COVID that are out there. And there's some other issues that we got to talk about. But one of those things is local government. So I live in Bibb County in Middle Georgia in Macon. And our trash collection for our part of town is on Fridays. And typically the recycling truck comes early Friday morning, and the trash pickup comes mid-morning to early afternoon. And the recycling, as usual, came sometime around 7 o'clock Friday morning. I was up doing show prep on Friday, and the recycling truck showed up. Well, the garbage truck never came. And we were like, well, maybe, is there a holiday? Was it the rain? Because, the storms came in, so maybe they were going to delay it until Saturday. Because sometimes if there are really bad storms coming through, they'll stop and they'll pick it up on Saturday. And on Friday, there was a chance of tornadoes. There were severe thunderstorms, and Saturday was going to be sunny. Well, Saturday came, and the trash truck never came. Sunday came, the trash truck never came. Monday came, and the trash truck never came. And then I started realizing everybody in the neighborhood, except for the last 3 streets on the trash truck's route, everybody else got picked up. So literally, we got 3 streets in my neighborhood where the trash wasn't picked up. And ours was one of them. And so I didn't want to call my county commissioner, which in the past I've done it when there were problems as we were changing stuff. And I was like, I don't want to bother Mallory, my county commissioner. I used to be a city councilman, and I realize it comes with the territory, but I don't like to bother people if I can figure out a way. So it's like, you know what? I'll call the solid waste department. So I called the solid waste department for Macon, Bibb County, to tell them they forgot to pick up our trash on Friday. And I got a message when I go, due to COVID-19, this office is closed to the public. It's like, really? You can't even answer the phone? I mean, you call and you get, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, this office is closed to the public. They wouldn't, it's like 3:30 in the afternoon, and they don't even answer the phone anymore because due to the COVID-19 panic, this office is closed to the public, including the phone lines. So I'm thinking to my wife, and I was like, you know what? I'll call. There's another phone number I can call for advanced disposal or whatever it is now. They've changed their name. And so I call that, and I'm on hold for a good 5 minutes to get the message. Due to extraordinary call volume, we were not able to take your phone call at the moment. And the phone disconnects. I'm like, I uttered a few choice words. Thank goodness it's Holy Week. I know I'm forgiven. So my wife says, well, they've set up a website. Go to the website. So I've got to go to a web. I can't just call someone and say they forgot our trash cans. And it's not just me. I mean, if it was me, I would think, well, maybe they're mad at me because I said something on radio. It is literally like the last 3 streets in the neighborhood. Everybody's still got their trash on the curb. Nobody's brought the trash cans back because we're all thinking, surely they will, at least maybe this Friday they will pick it up. But now people's trash cans are starting to overflow, and no one's come to pick up the trash. And I filled out the ticket on the website, but you're always like, are they paying attention? I got the receipt. Does anybody actually look at this stuff? And I say that because I remember when I was on city council in Macon, we had a website where you could go and you could put stuff. And one day, someone realized, oh, you know what? We can actually get in there and look at stuff. And I mean, there was a backup. I mean, it was months of stuff after we got the system before anybody realized you could go in there. I assume somebody's checking. But if anybody knows anybody at Solid Waste in Macon, Georgia, some of us didn't get our trash picked up on Friday, and we're still waiting, and there's nobody to call. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, this office is closed to the public. Yes! I mean, I would love to work in government right now. I'm sorry, I can't answer the phones because due to the COVID-19 pandemic, this office is closed to you taxpayers who pay my salary. Okay. All right. Enough of that. We got to move on. We got to talk about the Democrats and gerrymandering. You know, so I want to go back to a clip that I played yesterday. This is, where is it? This is Chris Wallace and Jen Psaki, the White House press secretary, engaged on the matter of the filibuster. Listen to this.
President to push to kill the Senate filibuster in order to pass legislation to protect voting rights. Here's what the president said about that this week.
If there's complete lockdown and chaos as a consequence of the filibuster, then we'll have to go beyond what I'm talking about.
While the president says that the filibuster is a relic of the Jim Crow era, here's what Joe Biden said when he was in the Senate himself. Take a look.
At its core, the filibuster is not about stopping a nominee or a bill. It's about compromise and moderation.
And just last year, Kamala Harris, when she was in the Senate, led the filibuster against Republican Senator Tim Scott, an African-American, his plan for police reform. So is the filibuster racist? Is it wrong?
As the president said just last week, Chris, it's been abused. And in the first 50 years of the filibuster being around, it was used about 50 times. It was used 5 times that many last year. The president doesn't think that's how the filibuster should be used. There's an easy solution here, though, which the president would certainly advocate for, which is Democrats and Republicans coming to the table with a willingness and an openness to discussing how we get things done. If they want to come to the table and talk about how to make voting easier, more accessible, let's have that conversation. The president's eager to have it. He's not eager to move with destroying the filibuster. He's eager to get things done for the American people. But he's also not going to stand by and prevent forward-moving progress from happening. So that's what people heard from him last week.
I just want to point out, because some people noted it after the news conference, if you're talking about abuse of the filibuster over the last 2 years, the Democrats were in the minority, so they were the ones abusing it.
Yes. Thank you, Chris Wallace, for pointing that out at the end. You know, I listened to that clip the first time, and I was yelling at my computer as I listened to the clip, and then he suddenly pointed it out. I was glad he did. The point here is on the hypocrisy. The Democrats abuse it, stymie it, shut it down, and then suddenly it becomes bad. As I mentioned the first hour, there's this fierce moral urgency to get rid of the filibuster, so they don't let facts matter. But the same is holding true now for their raw power in Congress. You had the Democrats essentially say anyone who showed up in the Capitol on January 6th was an insurrectionist and needs to go to jail for life. And now there's a report in Politico that it does turn out a lot of the people who wandered into the Capitol really didn't mean any harm. They thought, well, everybody else is in there. I'm going to go check out and see what's going on. Must be allowed. And they're being arrested for misdemeanors, and the Democrats are upset they're not going to go to jail for forever. And we're talking like grandma wandered in and said, what's the crowd doing in the Capitol? I didn't realize we could go in there. There are some who will go to jail for a very long time for insurrection, but a lot of people were there just out of curiosity. And the Democrats want to downplay that. Well, you've also got this issue now with the Democratic hypocrisy when it comes to gerrymandering. The Democrats have, for the last 4 years, with Eric Holder leading the effort, have been claiming we need to get rid of gerrymandering. In fact, the Democrats, for the longest time, advocated a nonpartisan redistricting committee for each state, and they've been able in a number of states that have voter referenda drives to get just that, to get nonpartisan gerrymandering or nonpartisan redistricting commissions. It turns out that the nonpartisan redistricting commissions benefit Republicans. Why? Because in states like Iowa and Florida that have headed in this direction, and even in Virginia, when you divide up the states and try to keep communities of interest together, you wind up drawing a few more Republican districts. So the Democrats are realizing their nonpartisan redistricting efforts aren't actually working. And after years of fundraising, claiming that that's what America needs and we need to stop gerrymandering, suddenly the Democrats are having to go for broke and fight for redistricting. Here's the headline in The Atlantic: Why Democrats Might Need to Play Dirty to Win. Subtitle: The party is trying to ban partisan gerrymandering nationwide, but aggressively redrawing districts in blue states like New York may be the only way to preserve its House majority. To hear Democratic leaders decry gerrymandering as part of their current bid to enact landmark voting rights legislation, you'd think the centuries-old practice was a mortal threat to the republic. But political necessity could soon demand that Democrats drop their Purity Act. To keep their narrow House majority, they might have to deploy the tactic everywhere they can, and every bit as aggressively as Republicans do. Nowhere are the stakes higher for Democrats than in New York. The party there has its largest legislative majorities in a century and more sway over more seats than anywhere else in the country. A cutthroat approach to redistricting in New York could eliminate or substantially alter as many as 5 Republican-held seats, a number equivalent to the Democrats' current edge in the House. The early maneuvering by New York Democrats is already revealing the party's shaky commitment to its national anti-gerrymandering push, one that has long been rooted less in principle than the Democrats' passionate message would suggest. What could impede the Democratic effort to make the most of its dominance in New York is not the fear of hypocrisy, but the party's internal politics. Nationwide, the challenge for Democrats is formidable. The shuffling of House seats as a result of the decennial census is expected to shift power from mostly Democratic states like California, New York, and Illinois to states like Texas, Florida, and North Carolina, all of which will have legislatures controlled by Republicans who will be in charge of drawing new districts. The bottom line is, if this becomes an arms race and both parties maximize their advantage in the states that they control, Republicans will come out ahead. David Wasserman, an analyst for the nonpartisan newsletter The Cook Political Report, told me the GOP needs to flip just 5 Democratic seats to recapture the House majority in 2022, and conceivably the party could gain all those seats through gerrymandering alone. Wasserman projects that Republicans could net anywhere from 0 to 10 seats just from redistricting. The gerrymandering poses a danger to America. That gerrymandering poses a danger to America is a relatively recent discovery for Democrats. Only after Republicans routed them in state and congressional elections in 2010 and redrew hundreds of districts in their own favor did Democrats express outrage, which reached a fever pitch when they won the nationwide vote in the next election, but saw the GOP secure its second largest House majority in 60 years. The ensuing Democratic campaign against gerrymandering pushed states like Colorado and Virginia to adopt independent redistricting commissions aimed at preventing politicians from choosing their own constituents. None of this stopped Democrats elsewhere from gerrymandering themselves. After the 2010 census, they drew a notoriously skewed congressional map in Maryland that left Republicans with just a single seat in the 8-member delegation. Now Democratic groups that for years have criticized the practice are urging their party not to create unfair maps in blue states like Illinois and New York. 2 wrongs don't make a right, Kelly Ward Burton, the president of the National Democratic Redistricting Committee, told me. The group was launched in 2017 with the backing of former President Barack Obama and former Attorney General Eric Holder to reform redistricting. Burton, a former executive director of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, argues that Democrats don't need to gerrymander to keep the House majority. We want maps that reflect the will of the voters and reflect the actual makeup of the state. If that occurs, she says, then the House stays competitive and we can win. That's a bet many Democrats aren't willing to make. Now, it goes on from there, but the point is this. Democrats have now for the last decade, because Republicans did so well in 2010, they were able to redraw the lines and benefit Republicans. Democrats would say, oh, let's just get rid of gerrymandering altogether. We'll do neutrality. Well, Nate Silver at the 538 blog, they've done a detailed analysis of the nation. And it turns out no matter which way you carve up a state with a nonpartisan committee, when you get away from the states that border the Atlantic and Pacific, when you get into the heartland, when you get into Texas, when you get into Georgia, when you get into Florida, when you get into Louisiana, when you get into Missouri, when you get into Iowa, when you get into you name it, turns out that if you just had a nonpartisan commission draw the most reasonable lines possible, it benefits the Republicans. It benefits the Republicans. And the Democrats know it. And so they're willing to use this rhetoric like this outside group say, well, we just want fair lines, when they know they can't get fair lines that benefit Democrats. The fair lines benefit the Republicans. So they can say superficially that's what they want while knowing behind the scenes that the Democrats are going to be as ruthless as the Republicans to try to get what they can get and draw lines that benefit them, because it's all about power for them. It's all about power. It's never about principle. It's about power. And they're going to use their power and the few legislatures they control to do whatever they can to stop the Republicans from taking back Congress. Principles be damned.
You're listening to the Erick Erickson Show, the perfect blend of news, analysis, opinion, and cooking. Yeah, cooking.
Everybody's voting for the friendly voice of radio, the people's choice. Music, weather, sports, and news, it's radio. The people choose. Everybody swinging to the swinging voice of radio, the people's choice. Big fry, small fry, dawn to dawn, it's radio that turns them on. Swinging, singing. A million sounds you want to hear. It's a landslide every year. Everybody's diving in the smiling voice of radio, the people's choice. East Coast, West Coast, in between, it's radio that makes us see. Wherever you go. You can listen to the news. You can swing with the blues on this wonderful, wonderful station. Just take a lively companion wherever you go. Take a portable radio. Take a portable radio.
Look alive. Everything lights up, makes you want to shout. Talk about happiness, that's what we're talking about. Nobody won't bring you happiness, but we know who will. Come on now, smile, get happy, yeah. You're listening.
Yeah, like all the time I'm listening.
To the station that swings.
This station really swings me.
The swingin'est sounds in music.
Ooh, swingin'est, ringin'est.
It's the station that swings.
Ooh, like this station's really got me in orbit.
Music. That's our middle name. Music.
Time to get up, get out of bed, fill your cup and get ahead.
Educates, syncopates, radio communicates, radio, the sound of year-round pleasure.
Join Erick's Army of Activists. Text ARMY to 33777 now.
Hello there. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. I mentioned earlier, I'm a professional, and so you probably didn't even notice it. I lost my train of thought when I was talking about the insurrectionists, supposed insurrectionists storming the Capitol. Some of them were. But along those lines, you will recall the Democrats saying all these people need to go to jail and that they were disrupting democracy, and that if a state certified an election, we couldn't overturn it. Who were we to overturn it? They wanted Marjorie Taylor Greene and the like to be shut down and put out of power and not allowed to fly on airplanes. That they want any Republican, Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz, they want them punished for daring to disrupt. Well, now the Democrats in Iowa, they want to gain, they got a 5-seat majority in the House. They want a 6th seat, and the Democrat lost in Iowa by 6 votes, and the Democrats are orchestrated an effort to throw the Republican who won out of the House of Representatives and seat the Democrat instead. And where's Joe Biden on all of this?
I have a question about the Iowa 2nd Congressional District race. Four Republican senators in a letter to corporations are calling the battle for Democrats to take back the seat an unacceptable attempt to undermine a legitimate democratic process. Does the president agree with their assessment?
I believe that the process that is outlined by the House of Representatives is what's being followed here to ensure every vote is counted. So no, he wouldn't agree with that.
So not going to condemn it. And now Nancy Pelosi.
And we want to be fair. Now, if I wanted to be unfair, I wouldn't have seated the Republican from Iowa, because that was my right on the opening day. I would have just said, they're not seated. And that would have been my right as Speaker to do.
Oh, that would have been my right to refuse to. Actually, it's a majority of the House decides, not the Speaker decides. But she thinks it's her right, and now she thinks it's her right to throw that Republican out and replace that Republican with a Democrat. Now, here's the Democrats' argument. There were 22 absentee ballots that we know, had they been counted, the Democrat would have won the race. The reason the absentee ballots were not counted is because they, in various ways, violated the laws of the state of Iowa. For example, here in Georgia, if you fail to sign your absentee ballot, it doesn't get counted. In Iowa, it was something similar. And one of the ballots was taped shut in a way that made it difficult to get into. That violates the law in Iowa. There are several other reasons. Those are the laws in Iowa. So what the Democrats are now arguing, after saying you gotta defend state elections and the rules of state elections, what the Democrats are now arguing is that they can ignore the rules of state elections and they can ignore state certifications. Exactly the opposite of what they were arguing in January. Now, yes, it is true. It is true that Republicans, some of them, not all of them, but some of them, were trying to throw out the Electoral College votes, claiming bad elections. But it was the Democrats then saying, no, you can't do this. Essentially, the Democratic position is all about power, that we will take a position, and if our power is jeopardized, we will change our position. That makes them no better than what they claim about Republicans. That makes them no better. That's all about power. This goes back to the gerrymandering issue, that the Democrats believe gerrymandering is bad, but now that it benefits them, they're perfectly happy to do it. They're perfectly happy to gerrymander to advance their power. Who cares about what they said just 6 months ago? What a scam that they're running on their voters. It's all about power for them. Now, when we come back, speaking of that power, we got to get into some of the misinformation and disinformation out there on the Georgia law that has been passed. Even Chris Wallace on Fox News has embraced some of the Democrats' talking points, and PolitiFact is out. PolitiFact is a shameless hack partisan tool for the Democrats that routinely distorts the truth in order to claim it a lie so that they can give the Democrats cover on stuff. And we should explore that when we come back. We'll take your phone calls as well. 877-973-7425. This hour of the program is brought to you by Omaha Steaks. Now, they're not just a show sponsor. I'm a customer of Omaha Steaks. I am a customer of their delicious goodness, and I've been getting Omaha Steaks. Been given it as a gift. I've been getting it as a gift. Gosh, since before I was in law school, so late 90s. They've been around since 1917. They are dependable. They've got great quality. They're really delicious. They age their beef at least 21 days for that intense beefy flavor. That's really where the magic happens. It tenderizes. The flavor gets even beefier. Right now, if you go to omahasteaks.com and you put Georgia in the search bar, you're going to get a great package from Omaha Steaks. It's a great introductory package. It gives you a little bit of everything. They've got their butcher cut fillets. They got pork chops. They got burgers, chicken, kielbasa sausage, even their caramel apple tartlets that my wife loves. She had one of those last night. They're small and individually wrapped. You can stick them in the oven, individual treats for people. Now, Omaha Steaks doesn't just have that. They got seafood. They've got what I love, and I've been doing a lot of meal prep, is these individual chicken breasts that they pre-slice them and then flash freeze them. So they show up individually vacuum sealed. You pull them out. They're great for stir fry. That's what I've been using with. And then their bacon wrap fillets that I adore. My goodness, do I love their bacon wrap fillets. All right, if you want this package, it is a great, great package. I highly, highly recommend it. Go to omahasteaks.com, put Georgia in the search bar, get the Butcher's Bestsellers package. Right now, if you do that, and this is about to go away, but if you do it, you're going to get 4 free burgers and 4 free chicken breasts. That's right, 4 free burgers and 4 free chicken breasts if you do the Butcher's Bestsellers right now. It's a great deal, but this is going to be going away soon. So now is the time. Remember, you go to omahasteaks.com and you put Georgia in the search bar. PolitiFact has out a piece. They're attacking Josh Holmes. Josh Holmes was on Fox News Sunday. Josh Holmes is the former chief of staff to Senator McConnell. And Holmes took issue with the characterization of the water ban in Georgia. He said that he's heard it a couple of times on this program, the idea that they've criminalized giving people bottles of water. They have not. What is in this statute, what is absolutely clear, is that they're preventing political organizations from giving people in-line things, meals, water, what have you. Water is and should be provided at the polls for people who are standing in line. They went back and forth on this, and Holmes says he's not suggesting it should be wrong to provide people water in line. He says that the law specifically says it can't be provided by political entities seeking to, one way or another, influence the outcome of a vote. Here's the thing. The reality is, PolitiFact, of course, says it's mostly not true. It actually is mostly true. What they've done is they've nitpicked. They have specifically nitpicked Holmes's assertion. What Josh Holmes, Mitch McConnell's former chief of staff, on Fox News said about the Georgia election law is true. That the ban on food and water at polls is about stopping political organizations from essentially giving benefit, political benefit, or electioneering at the polls. PolitiFact says it's mostly not true. Amy Sherman is the writer at PolitiFact who says this. Amy Sherman is a staff writer based in South Florida who helped get it off the ground. She has a history degree at Macalester College in St. Paul. She's a native of Amherst. And the problem here is that, like all the PolitiFact writers, by and large, it is very rare for them to actually give a Republican a mostly true, because what Holmes said is mostly true. If you're within 150 feet of the poll locations in Georgia, only poll workers can give you water, and then through unattended stations, water stations that they set up within 150 feet, you can walk over, you can grab the water, you can get back in line. Beyond 150 feet, anyone can give you water for free or for pay. They can give you water, they can give you beer, they can give you food. as long as they stay 25 feet from the line. Now, what's actually happening here, and this is the most relevant bit of this, is the PolitiFact wants to echo the claim. Let me read you a thread from Michael Duncan. He's a political, he's involved in politics. He's a friend of Josh Holmes, and he articulates great what PolitiFact is doing. Josh Holmes says the bill doesn't stop people from giving water. It stops political organizations from doing it. The fact checker says we're going to fact check whether it stops people from giving people water. See, it's a sleight of hand. What Amy Sherman is doing is she's actually not arguing what Josh Holmes said. She's willfully obtuse to come to the outcome she wants. We thought they were going to fact check whether water was banned. The statement is mostly false because the law doesn't require water. You see, when PolitiFact moves the goalposts, they can come up with whatever outcome they want. It's a very neat trick. PolitiFact is not only wrong, but based on this fact check, they're operating in bad faith. See, let's walk through this again. You've got to understand what PolitiFact does when it wants to defend Republicans. Josh Holmes's statement is that political organizations are not allowed as part of electioneering to give out water at the polls, but water itself can be given out at the polls. What PolitiFact does is it says it's mostly false by mischaracterizing what Walsh actually says. Following the show, the debate moved to Twitter, where Fox News Sunday and Holmes tweeted provisions of Senate Bill 202. The law says no person shall solicit votes in any manner or by any means or method, nor shall any person distribute or display campaign materials or give gifts or money, including but not limited to food and drink, to an elector, nor shall any person solicit signatures for any petition within 150 feet of the outer edge of the building. Holmes tweets the last section clearly exempts poll workers from prohibitions on political entities providing water. Holmes is correct. Poll workers can set up self-serve water stations. However, during the show, he misled when he said the law doesn't criminalize giving away water. The law makes it a misdemeanor to give away food or water within 150 feet. Violations of the law are punishable. But wait. That's not what the law says. Notice the twist from PolitiFact. You can give away water within 150 feet. It's got to be at unattended stations. The law doesn't ban only political entities from handing out water. Actually, it makes it clear that poll workers can hand out water. Keith Williams, general counsel to Republican House Speaker David Ralston, told PolitiFact any individual other than a worker at a polling place is prohibited from handing out water within 150 feet. Yes, but what they're saying, PolitiFact is saying, it's a very clever sleight of hand. They're saying essentially that nobody can give out water. Josh Holmes is saying, yes, you can give out water within 150 feet if you're a poll worker. PolitiFact is essentially doing the three-card monte, the shell game here, saying don't look at what Josh Holmes actually said and how he defended himself. We're going to tell you they're criminalizing it, but they're not criminalizing it. Poll workers can give out self-service water. And then what they distract from altogether is 150 feet. 150 feet. They wait for the very last sentence to say people can hand out water or food outside the 150-foot boundary and 25 feet from standing in line. They have shifted what Josh Holmes said so that they can distort the Georgia law and make a claim about criminalizing water. Based on PolitiFact's mostly false statement, Josh Holmes said Georgia doesn't criminalize giving people water. That is a statement of fact, and it is true. Poll workers can give water to people within 150 feet. But PolitiFact wants to call it mostly false And so they've shifted what Josh Holmes said to something he did not say so that they can say it's mostly false. It's disingenuous. It's dishonest. It's what we've come to expect from Politico or from PolitiFact as they try to defend Democratic talking points. They do this constantly and repeatedly. They always give Democrats the benefit of the doubt in their statements and then always move the goalposts when it's a Republican statement so that they can say the Republican is lying, even when they themselves are the ones not accurately reflecting what that Republican said. In this case, Josh Holmes says accurately that the law does not criminalize giving people water within 150 feet. Josh Holmes is right. The law specifically says people can be given water. It's just by whom. The poll workers can give it. Political operatives can't. No non-voters within 150 feet of the polls. PolitiFact ignores all of that so they can say it's mostly false. Why? Because they want to amplify a Democratic grievance so that the Democrats can use it to make a moral case against the filibuster so that they can pass H.R. 1 in the Senate and all the rest of their initiatives. PolitiFact is a willful soldier in the left's battle to moralize everything the left wants as righteous and demonize everything the right wants or opposes as bad so that PolitiFact, along with the Democrats and the rest of the press, can get what they want. Remember, who runs PolitiFact? Reporters. Why do they run PolitiFact as opposed to reporting the news? Because the American public is in on the act where reporters are left-wing mouthpieces for the Democrats. And so the Poynter Institute and the Democrats have funded this group called PolitiFact through a media outlet so that all the left-wing reporters you know are left-wing reporters now just say, well, I'm not a reporter, I'm a fact checker. What I say is true. No, you're still left-wing hacks, and now you lie even harder.
There's not my truth or your truth. There is only...
Wow. The Washington Free Beacon has this story. Welcome back. It's Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. President Joe Biden's COVID team, this is from the Washington Free Beacon, Aram Sibarium. President Joe Biden's COVID team appears to have entertained an electronic test and trace program pioneered by the University of Illinois that would have let businesses deny service to patrons based on their health data, a PowerPoint presentation obtained by the Washington Free Beacon shows. The program has eerie echoes of China's surveillance system, which uses data from citizens' phones to impose quarantines. A PowerPoint produced by the school suggests scaling up the university's intrusive contact tracing system for use across the United States. Its file name, 2020-1214 SHIELD Biden COVID Team, indicates that it was presented to the Biden team in December amid an ongoing search for solutions to a seemingly insoluble problem: how to stop the virus without stopping the economy. The presentation proffered an answer. The school system uses a mobile app that records test results and Bluetooth data to determine who has been exposed to the virus and links building access on campus to the information. Local businesses have also embraced it, making entry conditional on a safe status reading from the app. The system resembles the one being used in China, where a mandatory app gives each user a health status, green, yellow, or red, that dictates access to public spaces. The University of Illinois app, likewise, divides users into three categories: yellow if they've recently tested negative, orange if they've potentially been exposed, and red if they've recently tested positive. Only students with a yellow status may enter buildings. The proposal would amount to a more extreme version of the vaccine passport being rolled out by airlines in some U.S. cities, which are already causing controversy. Those passports, such as New York's Excelsior app, indicate whether an individual has tested negative or been vaccinated, but not whether they've been exposed to the virus based on tracking data. They collect less information and use a less granular classification scheme than the University of Illinois app, meaning they pose relatively fewer risks to civil liabilities. It's unclear how much a scheme would play with liberal activists. While it represents the sort of ambitious nationwide COVID response Biden has said he wants, it also threatens to exclude far more Americans from public life than measures like voter ID laws, which progressives have decried as the new Jim Crow. Only 11% of Americans do not have a government-issued ID, according to the Brennan Center for Justice, whereas 19% don't own a smartphone. Widespread adoption of the app could ice nearly a fifth of the U.S. out of the economy, never mind the polling booth. Stacey Abrams Fair Fight, whose founder has called voter ID laws a way to scare people out of voting, did not respond to a request for comment. The app's selling point is its ability to quickly isolate cases. We need a SWAT team approach for hotspots, the presentation reads. The goal should be to isolate, confirm positives in hours, not days. It further encourages the universal adoption of the app's safe status requirements, saying they are a critical aspect of curbing the spread in any community. Has to clarify the context of the presentation. Neither the university nor the White House responded to requests for comment. It's coming. It's coming. It's going to be a tracker. Now, look, I got my vaccine card. It won't really affect me. I got to tell you guys, though, the White House is beginning to freak out about a rise in cases yet again in the country. I don't know if you saw the CDC director in near tears about a potential rise in cases, a fourth wave in the United States, even as vaccines are on the rise. I don't know that that is helpful to have out there. I don't know that it is helpful to have essentially the head of the CDC go back into tear and fear mode to try to convince people that something awful, something that wicked this way comes. It just doesn't seem like it is useful to have the CDC at a time where we're urging people to get vaccinated to nearly have a meltdown. She was on with Rachel Maddow. And here's what the CDC director said.
I'm watching the cases tick up. I'm watching us have increased numbers of hypertransmissible variants. I'm watching our travel numbers tick up. And the sense is I've seen what it looks like to anticipate the oncoming surge. And what I really would hate to have happen is to have another oncoming surge just as we're reaching towards getting so many more people vaccinated. You know, we're still losing people at 1,000 deaths a day. And so I just can't face another surge when there's so much optimism right at our fingertips.
Well, there is optimism right at our fingertips, and there should be, and maybe there will be a surge, but it will mostly be of people who can recover from it. And I don't know that we need to freak out. Here comes Joe Biden.
I will always give you it straight from the shoulder. Our work is far from over. The war against COVID-19 is far from won. This is deadly serious. We share the sentiment of Dr. Walensky, the head of the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. The CDC expressed earlier today, this is not a time to lessen our efforts. That's what she said. We could still see a setback in the vaccination program. And most importantly, if we let our guard down now, we could see a virus getting worse, not better. You know, as many people as we vaccinated, we still have more Americans left to go. You know, we will administer more shots in March than any country on earth. But even so, we have to give more shots in April than we did in March. Because we're in the life and death race with the virus that is spreading quickly, with cases rising again, new variants are spreading, and sadly, some of the reckless behavior we've seen on television over the past few weeks means that more new cases are to come in the weeks ahead. With vaccines, there's hope, which is a very good thing, to state the obvious. But people are letting up on precautions, which is a very bad thing. Look, to this point, cases have fallen 2/3 since I took office. Deaths have also fallen 2/3. But now cases are going back up. In some states, deaths are as well. You know, we're giving up hard-fought, hard-won gains. And as much as we're doing, America, it's time to do even more. All of us have to do our part, every one of us.
Here are the states where cases are low and staying low. Maine, Ohio, Georgia, Montana, Alaska, Texas, Utah, Kentucky, Wisconsin, Wyoming, New Mexico, Nevada, Louisiana, Oklahoma, Mississippi, Oregon, Alabama, Kansas, Arizona, California, Arkansas, Guam, and the Northern Marianas Island. Here are states where cases are high and staying high. New York, Michigan, New Jersey, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, Delaware, New Hampshire, Vermont, Minnesota, Florida, West Virginia, Colorado, South Dakota, South Carolina, Maryland, Illinois, Iowa, Virginia, North Carolina, North Dakota, Tennessee, Idaho, and Nebraska. Overwhelmingly, it is cold weather states or states that have seen big spikes in cold temperatures where the virus is going up. And the states that have entered warmer weather tends to be going down. Does make you wonder about the seasonal variations with the Democrats, that they so usefully want to ignore that particular issue here until it's politically convenient for them to do. Greetings, welcome. It is Erick Erickson here, the Erick Erickson Show. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. You know, occasionally now doing two shows, a local show in Atlanta and now a syndicated show in the mornings. Occasionally I can get someone to come on in the morning and then I can run the interview in the afternoon, or they come on in the afternoon and I can run their interview in the morning. And thus is the case now with the governor of the state of Georgia, Brian Kemp, who went on a media whirlwind tour yesterday to defend the Georgia election law. He started on my afternoon program and then hit Fox News and Newsmax and several other talk radio shows in defense of it. And I wanted to ask him about a few other things, including the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. The governor of Georgia sent the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, the biggest newspaper in Georgia, 15,000 documents in Open Records Act request. And the horror of horrors, it turns out that the governor of the state of Georgia tried to balance public health concerns and economic concerns. He's being attacked and condemned by the newspaper in Atlanta for not just listening to public health officials and ignoring everyone else and shutting down businesses and destroying lives. They're upset he didn't do that. And I wanted to ask him about that as well. So we had this conversation yesterday. 2 weeks ago, he joined me here live, and I had to run it in the afternoon show. Well, yesterday it was, and today it's pretty much the opposite. The legislature is out today. It comes back tomorrow in Georgia for its last day tomorrow. And the governor is having to deal with a ton of stuff today related to the legislature, so he couldn't join me live. Wanted to bring you the broadcast, the conversation I had with Governor Kemp yesterday afternoon. Governor, thanks, number one, for being here, and number two, for going on and signing that law so we didn't have to have a week of people protesting, urging calls, and trying to storm the building.
Well, good to be on with you this afternoon, Eric. Beautiful day in the great state of Georgia.
It really is. We've seen the protests out there today, and the amount of distortion and disinformation about this legislation. And I realize they're trying to make a case to get rid of the filibuster, and they're lying about the legislation to try to make that happen. But I mean, the truth is, it's a good piece of legislation.
No, it definitely is. I think very balanced. Continues to do two things that we've always worked for here in Georgia, at least I have over the last decade, and that's to make it easy to vote and hard to cheat. And it's hard to believe that some people are protesting us using replacing the signature match with a voter ID, which is free in Georgia, by the way, and has been for a long time, securing drop boxes around the clock, requiring poll workers to continue tabulating ballots until every vote is counted, and also expands access, especially on the weekends. I'm not exactly sure why you would protest those things.
Well, and it seems like they're trying to distract from all of that by focusing on water at the polls. And as I've pointed out, beyond 150 feet from the polls, they got to stay 25 feet from the line, but you can have unattended water stations within 150 feet, and just a gross distortion of what you can and cannot do. I'm actually having a private one-on-one with a national reporter right now, trying to explain this to him and pointing out the passages of the law. And his head is exploding in this conversation as he realizes he's been played.
No, absolutely. And as they say, this argument doesn't hold water. It's unbelievable that President Biden even focused on this. The president of the United States is talking about water when the dam is busted on the southern border and people are fleeing into our country, and he's focused on a mistruth about what this election law does in regards to people that are waiting in line. But the other question that I've been putting out there to people is, you know, if you're one of those people that actually was in line long enough to actually want or need a water or something to eat, you should have issues with your county elections office as to why it's taking so long for you to vote and to get through the system. And, you know, believe it or not, this legislation addresses that with the number of machines that you would have to be required to have at a precinct to speed up the process. Of course, no one's talking about that in the national media or with these third-party groups that are benefiting financially from this or have an agenda in Washington, D.C. with H.R. 1.
Yeah, that's one of the fascinating aspects of this that's been totally lost in the coverage is in the last year, we had national media coverage blasting Georgia, claiming there were these long lines and it was the first day of early voting and clearly voter suppression as a result. And now the legislation requires that precincts that have backups have to add new machines and add new precincts. And there's absolutely no coverage of that efficiency in the legislation, or the fact that if this law wasn't signed, once your pandemic order goes away, my understanding is drop boxes would go away, and yet now we're going to legalize them officially.
Well, that's right. And this crowd, they are professionals of just saying something till in their mind it becomes the truth. But it's not the truth, Eric. And I think people should really go back and look historically over the last decade, really even back to 2006 when the photo ID requirement came in for in-person voting. Minority participation has increased. We had the largest percentage of African Americans voting in the 2018 election, and you know what kind of turnout we had in 2020. So a lot of these arguments are just not truthful. And I think people at the end of the day are going to wise up and realize that they're being played, and that there are people that are just flat out lying to them out there and not telling them what's really in the bill, because it takes away from their narrative, and they're doing all kinds of things, as we've seen, to distract from that.
Not being able to play with the truth on this, it's been such a frustration. I've been attacked over the weekend for pointing out the truth of the matter and people in firm denial. Now, one of the things that happened when you were signing this legislation is, of course, Representative Park Cannon, who has returned to the Capitol now, tried to disrupt it. And the Democrats keep saying she was just knocking on the door, but it seems like there's a history there with her not listening to the state police. And I'm wondering not so much about her specifically, but do you foresee any greater disruptions among the Democrats to try to cause a distraction and gain more attention as this issue starts to fade?
Well, look, I think it was just trying to distract and really to steer away, to have an issue that was tied to this, because they can't really truthfully look at you and say this takes away the ability to vote early in Georgia. It does not. It actually adds voter access, especially on the weekends. And, the Democrats, I don't think they really want to have a campaign with us on whether people support a photo ID or a voter ID for absentee ballots by mail, because not only is it going to be, I think, better for the process and make sure that every vote is counted and that ones that shouldn't be are not counted, but also it's going to speed the process up. I've asked local elections officials myself if they felt like that would be helpful to them, and they did, because you're moving away from an arbitrary process. And with the number of absentee ballots by mail that we had last election, it lasted a very long time. You couldn't get the vote counts in. That just breeds distrust in the elections and not timely results, which people are used to having here in the state of Georgia. So I personally think this is a really good policy move, and also believe that the vast majority of Georgians support that. So the Democrats got to have something else to rally behind. And there certainly is a history there, but I don't think we're going to have any other problems. A lot of these folks that were outraged over this are the same ones that wanted to make sure that when we started this session that things were going to be safe around here, because what they'd seen in Washington, D.C. with some people. And our folks here at the Capitol, we want to have a safe environment for everyone. I don't care whether you're a Democrat, whether you're a Republican, whether you're an activist, whether you're a protester, whether you have an issue, be it, from the NAACP to whether you're a homeschool parent that wants your kids to participate in sports or whatever. You should be able to come to the Capitol and have a peaceful environment and not be disrupted. We have a long history of not disrupting processes, whether it's in the legislative chamber, in the governor's office, or, when people are holding press conferences out there on in the public spaces of the Capitol. And that's the way it should be.
Amen to that. Governor, before you get off here, I was talking to a buddy of mine, Ryan Pernice, up at Table in Maine in Roswell, and he was telling me they've reached a unique point in the post-pandemic environment where they're struggling to find people to work and to work in the restaurants that his company owns. And there does seem to be this economic revitalization, trying to get people back into the workforce. And concurrent to that is the story from the AJC that essentially accuses you of putting the economy above public health as opposed to balancing the two, and wanted to see if you had any response to it.
Yeah, that was far-reaching by the AJC, much like their opinion piece on the voting legislation today. I mean, there's nothing surprising there. It's just more of their agenda by the editors down there at the paper. I mean, that is ridiculous, Eric. We turned over 15,000 records, and that's the story they got. I couldn't even finish reading it. It was so ridiculous. Dr. Toomey and I spoke to her about this Friday when we were down in South Georgia when I got vaccinated, and we have literally had to make hundreds, probably thousands of decisions, and I have consulted with her. Have I agreed with everybody on everything? No. We've had some, really good debates about how we balance health, balance the economy. Her role is the state's doctor, if you will, in public health, but then my role as governor, we both have different things that we have to balance. And that's the thing I love about Dr. Toomey. She understands that, a permanent lockdown is, there's other repercussions of that, of our schools not being open, mental health issues, people's livelihoods. And she is, I think, as good as anybody in the country of being willing to balance that and going back and forth with our whole team to get to a place where at the end of the day, I have to make decisions. And that is what I've done. I stand behind those. And quite honestly, our measured reopening has worked. Our numbers are no worse than a lot of other states that have continued to stay locked down or been like a yo-yo and locking down, opening up, locking back down. We've been consistent. We've worked with our folks in the private sector to plow through peaks and valleys, and we're going to continue to do that as we get the vaccine out and get back to normal.
Well, look, I know it was missed. I waded through the entire thing, and it just seems that so many people want a 100% must do public health and ignore the balance that public officials have to do between wrecking the economy and the public health crisis that comes from destroying the economy. So no easy situation, and I do think they totally missed that angle in the story. So I appreciate you responding to it.
And I appreciate you asking me. I've told people a lot of times, there wasn't a playbook for a global pandemic.
Yeah.
For any governor in the state. And I've been very careful about trying to criticize other governors, even though early on they criticized me. I've been trying to do what's right for Georgians and putting our people first. And, just to go back in Monday morning quarterback, I don't have time for that. We're moving forward. We got to keep reopening. We got to rebuild our economy. We got to help, especially these people, hardworking Georgians in the service sector area, leisure, travel, airline, some of those sectors that's really gotten hit hard. We're fighting every day for them, and that's what I'm going to keep doing. But we're also going to keep pressing very hard. As you can see, over the last week or two, we've been changing quickly on our vaccine deployment to make sure that we're being nimble and aggressive, and we're going to continue to do that to get shots in arms.
Well, Governor, listen, I appreciate it very much. Thank you so much for stopping by. I know you got a big media tour today talking about the truth of this election bill, so thank you for stopping by with us.
Thank you. Happy Easter.
You too. Happy Easter. Governor Brian Kemp.
News and in-depth analysis from
You could be live on Erick's show by calling 877-97-ERIC. That's 877-973-7425.
I'm not hearing you.
This hour of the program is sponsored by First Liberty Building and Loan. FirstLibertyGA.com is their website. If you need access to creative lending solutions, capital, security, loan, you name it for your business, 6 figures or more, so 100,000 and higher. FirstLibertyGA.com is the website you need to go to. They want to help you get to yes for your business in ways that a lot of banks are saying no right now in the economy. Go to FirstLibertyGA.com. We could not do the program without them, and a great way to support us is to support great companies like First Liberty Building and Loan, FirstLibertyGA.com. So this is Holy Week. One of the things that Christians meditate on Monday and Tuesday in Holy Week is the withered fig tree and Christ cleansing the temple, chasing out the money changers. It's something I'm a big advocate of within the conservative movement, and I've noticed there are a lot of hucksters and grifters out there who have taken to derisively calling the conservative movement Conservatives Inc., as if the people who haven't grifted are the grifters, and the grifters are pure as the driven snow. And there's a great example of this. There's a guy running for Congress. His name is Dan Rodimer. Dan Rodimer is let me just read you from the Washington Post. New Jersey boy, pro wrestler, failed Republican candidate in Nevada. Dan Rodimer is led many lives, but his latest, a cowboy hat-wearing, southern-drawling bull rider, may be the most extreme transformation to date. In his first ad as a candidate for Texas's 6th congressional district, Big Dan Rodimer speaks in a gravelly, indistinct Southern accent, throws jabs at Democratic policies, and compares House Speaker Nancy Pelosi to a bull, the bull he's supposedly riding in the ad. But the New Jersey native didn't have the twang last year when he ran for Congress in Nevada. In one of those ads, Rodimer's voice was softer and more clear as he defended himself against assault allegations raised by his opponent. So Rodimer is a guy from New Jersey who went to Florida for law school, moved to Nevada to run for the state house and lost, then ran for Congress and lost last year, and this year has moved to Texas to run in a special election. Listen to this comparison of ads. I don't even need to explain to you which ad is which. You'll be able to tell the Texas ad this year that's running on Texas airwaves right now, and the Nevada ad last year when he ran for Congress there. You can tell the difference. I don't even have to tell you. It's the exact same guy, though. Let me tell you that is the exact same human being you're going to hear in both of these ads. One is from last year running in Nevada. One is from right now running in Texas, both for Congress.
2 out of 3 dirty jobs done. I'm Big Dan Rodimer. Texas has big problems. We need a big fighter to solve those problems.
I'm Big Dan Rodimer, and I approve this message because I'm running on my record, while Dan Schwartz runs from his.
The communists in D.C. are ruining America. We have a big problem. Texas.
I had 1 arrest in my life while in college. Those charges were dismissed.
Send Big Dan to Congress. I know how to handle Nancy Pelosi and stop her bull.
I have no convictions and no criminal record. Yet, with the millions of dollars Schwartz makes in China, he's trying to buy our congressional seat.
Men and women's bathrooms, boys and girls sports, higher taxes, higher gas prices.
It's the exact same guy in 2 separate ads. Y'all, the conservative movement has got to chase the grifters, hucksters, charlatans, and frauds out of their movement. We've got to clean up. You've absolutely got to clean up. Big damn Rodimer, he needs to stop running for Congress. He literally, in New Jersey, ran for the state legislature and lost, immediately ran for Congress and lost, and then immediately packed up and moved to Texas to run. He claims he owns property in Texas. in the Houston, Galveston area. He's actually running in the Dallas area, well removed from any property he owns. We've got to take a firm line in the sand. Now, there are like 21 candidates in this race. He claims that Ted Cruz got him into the race. The Cruz camp is saying, nope, not us. Y'all, we gotta stand against people like this to clean up our own side so that voters take us seriously. You know, the voters are trying to find people who are against the wokes. But it can't just be the angry brain biblical donkey. It's got to be someone of some semblance of trustworthiness. And when you got a guy like this who clearly will say or do anything to get elected, it's not going to be him. We've got to clean up our own side. We have a real problem within the conservative movement of senior citizens being played and taken advantage of by the grifters, the hucksters, the con men, and the frauds. And you got a bunch of money, you got a bunch of people raising money off of these senior citizens, scaring them, lying to them, getting them worked up into a frenzy, telling them half truths or no truth at all. And I just think we got to draw a line in the sand and say, we're going to clean up our own side. Otherwise, the voters will clean it up. They won't side with us when they're desperate for us to stand up to the wokes. We've got to do it. Hello there. It is Erick Erickson here, the Erick Erickson Show. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Though if you're trying to call in right now, you can't. My call screener had to take his child to a doctor's appointment and can't answer the phones right now. I don't want to talk about politics. I don't want to talk about the news. I've been avoiding the Derek Chauvin trial stuff. I actually want to talk about this week. This is Holy Week. And on Friday, Tim Keller is going to join me for my Good Friday show. Now, let me say this, and, you know, people float in and out of radio. Who knows when they've tuned in, what they're hearing. I tend to be a conservative talk radio show host who plays it by the books, although I've noticed this trend. This was one of the things Rush was a genius about. He didn't just talk about politics in Washington. He talked about culture and football and streaming shows and things like that. And a lot of people just raw politics. One thing that I do talk about on this program, much to the annoyance of some, is faith. I shouldn't say I'm in seminary right now. I've had to put it on pause. Doing 6 hours of radio a day kind of makes it impossible. But I know by and large the people who listen to this program are people of faith. And I don't think in conservative talk radio circles it really gets talked about a whole lot. But it certainly defines who I am. And this is Holy Week, and I spend a little more time talking about it. And on Good Friday in particular, spend the entire show talking about various aspects of it. Tim Keller has out a new book. Tim Keller, for those of you who don't know, he's probably the most famous theologian on the planet right now. His books are translated into, I looked it up, something like 50 languages. His books have been translated in. His latest and probably his last, he's got pancreatic cancer he's battling right now. It's called Hope in Times of Fear, the Resurrection and the Meaning of Easter. If you want to order a copy of it, it's perfect for it. It's such a good read. If you text DATA to 33777, you will get a copy. You'll get a link to a copy of Keller's book. You can buy it off Amazon. 2,000 years ago on this planet, Christians believe a man named Jesus of Nazareth was executed. If you've ever seen The Passion of the Christ, it kind of highlights what the early church recorded. He was brutalized. He was a completely innocent man, not even sin. He was brutalized. He was beaten to within an inch of his life. He was tortured. He was spit upon. He was made to carry a cross. He had a crown made of thorns shoved onto his head, cutting into his skin, blood pouring down his scalp as he carried this cross after being beaten. And when the Romans beat you, they used a leather cord into which bits of bone and stone were tied so that when it hit you, it cut into your skin. And this happened to him twice, a mild beating and a severe beating, such that his skin was broken on the sides that you might see his ribs. He was brutalized. And then he was nailed. Others typically were tied. The worst offenders were nailed to crosses. And the cross raised, crucifixion, was a gruesome punishment where you withered on the vine, so to speak, and you ultimately suffocated. You could not hold your body up with enough support to get breath, and you ultimately suffocated on the cross. The Christians typically, they note, if you lasted too long, what the Romans would do is break your legs, so ultimately you couldn't lift yourself up and you would suffocate on the cross. Christ, when they came to break his legs, was already dead, and they stabbed a spear into his side, and blood and water came out. If that was the end of the story, that would be the end of Christianity. But something clearly happened. 2,000 years ago on planet Earth, there was not a civilization, a religion, a culture, or a mythology that had anything akin to what Christians were about to start describing. Now, a lot of atheists and a lot of skeptics, they say it would be easy to pull the wool over people's eyes millennia ago, because those people, they believed everything. They believed in witches and witchcraft and spells and gods and mythologies. And this is actually a very narrow, bigoted view of people. N.T. Wright, the Anglican theologian, wrote one of the definitive books on the subject, the resurrection of the Son of God, and pointed out, contrary to a lot of claims today, there is literally not a civilization on planet Earth 2,000 years ago that had anything resembling the Christian resurrection story. Now, the Jews had two beliefs in their culture on the issue of resurrection. Either they did not believe in the resurrection at all, or they believed we were all resurrected on the last day. They did not have a story or a language to contemplate one person being resurrected in the middle of human history. The Romans, the Greeks, the Indian subcontinent, the East Asians, the Norse, the Egyptians, the Africans, the Western Hemisphere cultures, they lacked the language of the Christian resurrection as well. Plenty of scholars, as N.T. Wright has noted, have examined this, tried to find archetypical stories of the resurrection, and they instead found that overwhelmingly the pagan religions on planet Earth 2,000 years ago did not have a resurrection belief. And for those that did have stories that echoed the resurrection, what you find are two patterns and only two patterns. The one pattern is of an ascent into the heavens as a godlike being, shiny in most cases, hard to set your eyes upon. The other is a back from the grave, withered corpse, pale and cadaverous. That's it. Our planet 2,000 years ago did not have a culture, regardless of place on the planet, that believed anything like what Christians claimed. Overwhelmingly, they rejected the idea of a physical bodily resurrection back to human form. Even those who had some sort of idea of it rejected the idea of coming back to life as a normal person. And then Jesus came out of the tomb. The early Christians were speaking into a Jewish community. They were speaking into the community most skeptical of this sort of supernatural event because the Jews had specific theology related to resurrection. The Sadducees did not believe in resurrection at all. It was impossible. And the rest of the community believed in resurrection, but only one variety of it. We all are resurrected at the end times. The dry bones come back to life at the end time with the return of the Messiah. It was everybody all at once. They had no language, no culture, no tradition, no belief in a single person being able to be resurrected after being in the ground 3 days. Certainly there were Old Testament accounts of the prophets Elijah and Elisha raising people from the dead who had died that day, but not someone in the ground for 3 days and decomposing and then comes back. That didn't exist. It wasn't possible. And so the Christians are speaking into this Jewish culture and tradition, and they told a tale so incredible that deviated so substantially from anything known. It's impossible to think anybody in that community would have believed them. The story just fit no archetypes known to exist on the entire planet, regardless of continent. Now, the apostles told the tale of this man Jesus coming out of the tomb. His burial cloth had been removed and folded up and set in a corner. Then he, neither shining brightly nor withered and cadaverous, was unrecognizable by anyone until he was recognizable. Tim Keller, in this book, Hope in Times of Fear, says the best way to think about it is like you've got a friend from 50 years ago who you see again. And so clearly it's the same person, but it takes you time to recognize that it's the same person because they're completely different than they were 50 years ago. But with Jesus, it was only the third day from his crucifixion. Likewise, Jesus had the wounds of the crucifixion, and he possessed the ability to enter locked rooms. But though he had the wounds of crucifixion and possessed the ability to enter locked rooms, he didn't look withered, cadaverous, transparent. He didn't look like a ghost. He was a real person. He ate a lot of eating. Jesus ate a whole lot when he returned. Clearly hungry after being on the ground 3 days. He appeared to multiple groups of people. He appeared to individuals. There were hundreds of witnesses alive by the time Paul wrote. But again, he wasn't in dazzling light. He didn't appear cadaverous. He did not fit any of the archetypes that existed on the planet at the time in the storytelling cultures. The story would have been impossible in Jewish culture. It isn't suggested in anything in the Bible. The resurrection, again, as I mentioned, of people in the Old Testament at the hands of the prophets were not multi-day-old affairs of withered corpses. Even with the New Testament and Jesus's multi-day-old resurrection of Lazarus, Lazarus required help. Here from John, the man who had died came out, his hands and feet bound with linen strips, his face wrapped with a cloth, and Jesus said to them, unbind him and let him go. With Jesus, however, someone unbound him and folded up the cloth. Then Simon Peter came following him and went into the tomb. He saw the linen cloth lying there and the face cloth that had been on Jesus' head, not lying with the linen cloths, but folded up in a place by itself. This is Holy Tuesday, and on Holy Tuesday, we remember Jesus spoke of the resurrection on Holy Tuesday and described it, and people didn't understand it at the time. It remains the only event in human history with the power to transform a person. You can believe or not that Washington crossed the Delaware and it's not going to affect you. You can believe or not that Caesar crossed the Rubicon. It's not going to affect you. You can believe or not that we landed on the moon. It's not going to affect you. You can believe or not that Joe Biden was fairly elected president of the United States. It's really not going to affect you. But at that time, 2,000 years ago, no language, no religion, no culture, no creed, no mythology, no race of mankind had a story, tradition, writing, or known statements that reflect how Christians describe Jesus' resurrection. And to this day, it is the only event in human history where if you believe by faith that it is true, even though you weren't there, you accept it as true, it has a profound regenerative power in your life. At the time, it was new. It came into the one culture most dogmatic in its belief that something like that would have been impossible. And yet the belief exploded in society. People who claimed to be eyewitnesses were willing to lose their lives professing the truth of the most extraordinary event. Paul in 1 Corinthians 15 writes, "For I delivered to you as of first importance what I also received, that Christ died for our sins in accordance with the Scriptures, that he was buried, that he was raised on the third day in accordance with the Scriptures, that he appeared to Peter, then to the 12, then he appeared to more than 500 brothers at one time, most of whom are still alive, though some have fallen asleep. Then he appeared to James, then to all the apostles." Tim Keller, in this book I'm going to interview him about on Friday, he writes of this passage in 1 Corinthians 15. One of the oldest theories is that the legends of Jesus' resurrection developed only many decades after the actual events had faded from living memory. But the 1 Corinthians text is itself an important piece of evidence against this view. Verses 3 through 7, the ones I just read, are now seen by most New Testament scholars as not an original Pauline composition, but rather an early gospel summary used by the earliest church in its evangelism and instruction, which Paul is citing. As he says in verse 3, the words were received, not created by him, and then passed on to others. Scholars also show the vocabulary in these verses, according to the Scripture, on the third day, the 12. They're not terms Paul uses anywhere in his writings, other than here. So this was a gospel summary that was already widespread by Christians all around the Mediterranean world when Paul wrote. Since this letter to the Corinthians was written 15 to 20 years after Jesus' death at the latest, James Dunn, a widely regarded, highly credited biblical scholar, says that he is convinced and that we can be confident that this statement in 1 Corinthians 15 was, and this is his quote, formulated within months of Jesus' death. Again, that's in Tim Keller's new book, Hope in Times of Fear. If you want to order it, you can text the word data to 33777. Now, Paul wrote these words at a time that they were already widespread in the Mediterranean. He cited them. They were not his originally. Something had to have happened. Whatever happened, it fell outside human understanding. It was real. It was powerful. It defied all the stories and archetypes of the time and storytelling. It defied every sort of event similar to it in every culture. It was unique in ways that all the other stories had a lot of similarities and nothing like this. And then it spread rapidly. In fact, all the people who believed it were willing to be executed for it. Jesus' own brothers were willing to be executed for it, even though they rejected him in life. And it remains a singularity, an event recorded in human history with eyewitnesses, that if we just judge it by the standards of history of the time, you've got to acknowledge it's historic. And it's the one event, if you're willing to believe it, that this really happened, that a man, not metaphorically, not abstractly, but really and truly physically came back out of the ground, completely regenerated and restored in human body. If you believe that, it begins to change your life. It begins to regenerate your life. You can have a personal relationship with Christ. This is Holy Week. I don't normally talk about this stuff on the radio, but this is Holy Week, and I feel obliged to do so. And on Friday, I do an entire show on Good Friday. I hope you'll join me. The music is as important as everything else on Good Friday. I take great care in listener feedback to put it together. And this Friday, this will be my 10th time doing it, and the first time I ever have a guest on. And it's not just any guest. It'll be Tim Keller, the probably at this point the world's most famous theologian of the 21st century, on radio with me as he's battling pancreatic cancer and has a new book out. I want to talk to him about hope in times of fear. I hope you will be here on Friday, 9 to noon. If you're listening live, you can always get the live stream at ErickEricksonShow.com. We'll be back.
There's not my truth or your truth.
You know, one of the things that we're seeing is the attacks on faith now from people, and it always happens around Easter. You know, there's a Gallup survey out that fewer people have church membership now. Easter is upon us. You know, my church, if you're in Middle Georgia, my church is going to do a service outside if you're uncomfortable being in a sanctuary. The First Presbyterian Church in Macon, it should be this Sunday doing an Easter service. And I hope you might consider going to church this Sunday and being a part of a community. One of the isolation of COVID is bad for everybody. And it's people are isolating. But it's going to be 10 a.m. this Sunday. There's going to be Easter on the lawn at First Presbyterian in Macon. If you're in the middle Georgia area, if you're listening on WMAC where I am, we'll all be outside experiencing it together. The weather's supposed to be good on Easter, and I want to be home for Easter. I want to be my family in church. We haven't been to church in months and months, and now that we're now several weeks beyond being vaccinated, we can go. You know, I got to tell you, I've got a friend of mine. It is weird that, you know, the COVID stuff, the numbers in Georgia are good, but they're on the rise nationwide. But I was with a friend of mine on Thursday and Friday. Now, we were outside on both occasions, and I was never closer than 6 feet from him on Thursday. I mean, I was with him on Thursday maybe for all of 5-10 minutes. And then on Friday was with him. We were at a gathering together, but we were outside. There were only 5 of us. And we were outside, and he was never less than 10 feet from me outside. So I'm not worried about me. And perfectly fine, a picture of health. And then Saturday, COVID hit. And has not really been out of bed since. It's really like the flu in that regard. I mean, this guy was a picture of health. Felt perfectly fine Friday night, and then Saturday couldn't get out of bed. And it's happening to people. And again, I'm not worried about me because we were never closer than 6 feet. And I mean, we were outside every time we come into contact. So I'm not worried about me, but this virus is still an issue for people. And my wife and I both are more confident now that we've had both rounds of the vaccine. I highly encourage people to get the vaccine, if only for the peace of mind. I mean, I've lost people dear to me from this virus. I know people who have lost family members, multiple family members in some cases. It makes it hard. And then on top of that, you've got this secular revisionism happening in the country right now with deep hostility to people of faith. Jim DeMint, actually, a guy who works for him, just texted me that a Yale professor is now out with a primer on homeschools, calling them, this is a Yale professor calling homeschool groups, quote, overt white supremacist and right-wing extremist groups. That conservative Christian institutions are sources of radicalization, and the Biden administration needs to craft effective policies to counter its toxic culture. Jim DeMint raising the red flag on this right now. A very big issue that is happening as the secular left, in deep hostility to people of faith, are coming to get us. We got to stand up, and we've got to defend our values, which is one reason I do the Good Friday. You'd be amazed at the number of people in radio now who say, you can't talk about that. If you're going to go national, you got to stop talking about faith stuff on the radio. It's who I am. I'm not going to give it up. And if you can't listen to me because I talk about Jesus, I'm sorry. That's on you, not me. If it hurts my career, that's fine with me. I'm not going to give up my faith just to be successful in this world, because that'll be the most successful you'll ever be. I'd much rather be successful in the next. Have a good weekend or good day.
Cam.